about 30 more seconds to let everybody trickle in, and then we'll get started with introductions. So let's just wait a little bit longer and we can get started. If we were in person, I would say to chat amongst yourselves, but maybe just enter a hello in the chat in lieu of that, just as we wait for a few more seconds for people to trickle in. Loving the hellos in the chat. Give her, say hello if you can. So on my end, I'm gonna get started. Hello everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for today's discussion, Transforming Boston, a Black and Brown Justice Agenda for the New Mayor. My name is Yanila Gonzalez, and I'm an assistant professor of public policy here at the Harvard Kennedy School. And I want to start with just a few housekeeping announcements on behalf of the Ash Center. So first, the Ash Center would like to acknowledge the land on which Harvard sits as the traditional territory of the Massachusetts people, and a place which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange among nations. We also would like to acknowledge and thank our co-sponsors for today's talk. This is all made possible by the hard work of course, our folks at the Ash Center, as well as our co-sponsors, the Carr Center for Human Rights Policy, the Center for Public Leadership, the FXB Center for Health and Human Rights, the Program on Criminal Justice at HKS, as well as the Rappaport Institute for Greater Boston. Today's event, just to let you all know, is being recorded, and the video will be made publicly available on the Ash Center YouTube channel after the event ends. You're welcome to, as I've said, say hello in the chat to anybody who's just joining us. And also, please feel free to submit questions at any time during over the duration of the event. You can use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen rather than the chat to make sure that that we can see those questions for our panelists. So now to get started, I want to pass it over to my co-moderator for today, David Corby, one of our great students here at HKS, to introduce himself and the event.
Thank you,
David?
Thank you, Ganelda, and welcome all to this event. My name is David Corby, and I'm currently a Master's of Public Administration candidate here at the Kennedy School. Thank you all for joining us today for the second of two important conversations around the Boston mayoral race, the dire reality Black and Brown communities face in Boston, and really a path towards an equitable Boston. As of Tuesday, November 2nd, 2021, Boston has elected Michelle Wu as its new mayor. The mayor-elect Michelle Wu, who will take her oath of office a week from today, will make history as the first female and first person of color mayor of Boston. This election serves as an end in itself, showcasing the great deal of change and progress that has been made to make this a reality. But we, as the hopers and agents of change, do not have the luxury to allow ourselves to become complacent with just this victory. This must be the beginning. Because as we've highlighted in the first conversation, and we will certainly highlight tonight, there's too much work that must be done to actualize the dream of true equity in Boston. So as we celebrate this immense accomplishment and the promises of this new era within Boston, we must be prepared to act, to put the collective energy, insights, and profoundness of this series into tangible actions for change. Because if we don't, we are assured to revisit the same conversation in about 4 years from now. So we have an amazing list of panelists joining us today, and their expertise ranges from educational equity, business development, and Black empowerment. So thank you, panelists, for leading this conversation today. And thank you, audience members, for joining us in this conversation. Now I'll pass it over to my co-moderator to introduce our esteemed panelists.
Well, thank you so much, David. I'd like to first, of course, introduce my daughter, who has just woken up from her nap. a young Bostonian who's also very interested in what we're going to talk about today. I really have a great honor to introduce our three great panelists for today's conversation. Our first panelist is Toyal Washington. Toyal is a 23-year-old activist and entrepreneur from Dorchester. She is the co-founder of Black Boston Inc., a community organization that helps to create political engagement for young Black people in the city. In addition to her advocacy work, Toyal is the CEO of a game company called the Masters Tools LLC. She creates card games that help people of all ages start discussions around race, class, gender, and more in a fun and competitive way. So really, thank you so much, Toyal, for being with us today. Our next panelist is George Chip Greenwich. Chip is a visiting fellow at the Carr Center for Democratic Governance and Innovation here at HKS, as well as the founding director of Greatest Minds Boston. Greatest Minds is a networking organization of educators, activists, entrepreneurs, young professionals, artists, college students, and community members. Through promoting intergenerational dialogue to highlight issues of race, socioeconomic class, and gender identity in urban cities and non-college campuses, Greatest Minds works towards solving social justice issues by developing a more inclusive economy in Boston. Thank you so much, Chip, for being with us again, with us today as well. And our final panelist is Kai Grant. Kai is a Roxbury-born entrepreneur and community development. She has extensive knowledge of Boston's small business landscape as a former store manager for retail giants LVMH and the Limited Brands. Kai is currently the founder of Black Market, an event space and launch pad located in the Nubian Square district of Roxbury. For the past 12 years, Kai has been implementing creative strategies for socioeconomic impact and has built authentic partnerships between artists, artisans, residents, stakeholders, and activists in the district. Her passions include space activation and retail reimagining inside of the neighborhood through mural and marketplace creation. Kai's latest initiative, called Nubiana, transformed a 50-year-old blighted lot into an open-air gallery and Black-owned marketplace with over 40 local artists and 81 founders attracting thousands of foot traffic to the struggling district between June and October 2021. So Kai, Toyal, Chip, thank you all so much for being with us today. We're really looking forward to being in conversation with you all. So I'll turn it over to David to get us started with the first round of questions.
Thank you, Nella. Okay, so for the first question, we really want to just get accustomed to you and your work. So can you give us an overview of your and your organization's work as an agent of social change in Boston's communities of color? And we're going to start off with Toyal.
So hi, everyone. I'm Toyal Washington once again. I'm the co-founder of Black Boston. So here at Black Boston, it's a nonprofit organization that essentially aims to address all the issues contributing to the oppression of Black people, of Black Bostonians. And we do this through a few different ways. So one of them being education. I like to say that, to heal a community, we have to know where the bruises are, right? And education is the foundation of everything. And so we have an educational programming team that creates a curriculum to kind of address those different issues and educate people on them. So talking about, the things that cause division, those areas that cause division, in the city, the things that cause distraction, from the real problems, talking about, how to be a good advocate, talk about how to stand, in your power as a Black person. And then we also have a political advocacy team whose sole purpose is to get Black people, politically engaged and informed, right? So Black people of all, the racial groups are the least politically engaged. And so we really try to, one, just transform language so people understand what policies are being put out, because that is a huge part of the issue. It's not that Black people don't care. It's that, they're putting out, these policies and things that clearly people don't understand. And so a part of our job is to make things more accessible, make sure that people can actually understand them, and then inform them when things are happening, internally and externally. And then lastly, we have, community organizing, which we really try to focus on, one, mutual aid. So letting people understand that you don't have to have a lot of money to help out your community and be a good neighbor, right? Just sharing, what you can and extending resources to those who need it. And then also just putting on events to celebrate Blackness, celebrate Black solidarity, just encourage each other to come together as a collective. So that is a little bit about what we do. But thank you so much for having me, and I'm excited to, continue this conversation tonight.
Thank you, Toyal. I really appreciate that consciousness raising and really working with the community to build that level of understanding, which I think we can all acknowledge there's a dearth in sort of like the accessibility of sort of these policies, and even in terms of the information being very esoteric. And so really appreciate the work that you're doing. I think it really connects with Chip's work. So I'm gonna kick it over to Chip.
Hi, everyone. George, Chip Greenwich here. I hope you can hear me really well. And I hope I'm not cutting out. Am I not cutting?
Chip, I think
Fine,
you are.
keep...
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So glad to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I'm so glad to be here with the Ash Center and doing the great work and so forth. And great to be here on the panel with these other people who I've known and seen work over the last many years. So I'm excited to be here. Greatest Minds is a convening organization that's made up of Black Bostonians that have come together over the last 12, 13 years to talk about political action issues and also social issues affecting Black Bostonians. And it's interesting, we started mainly was a way for us to start looking at getting political power. And the way that we did that mainly was by organizing ourselves through political forums. We had a number of political forums with Mayor Menino at the time, Michael Flaherty, and also a number of newcomers, such as Ayanna Pressley, Tito Jackson, Felix Arroyo, Carlos Enriquez. These are people that we've galvanized around to start building political power and so forth. So what Greatest Minds does is that it does that. It brings together like-minded individuals that have been in the Boston area for years and start looking at each other as resources. And I'm so glad to be here with Dr. Kaidi Grant over there, who's done great work. I've known Kaidi for the last 35, 40 years of my life, and our families are very tight and grown up together. And also I'm very interested in all the great work that Ms. Washington is doing, and so proud of building the Black Bostonian Network and so forth. And I'm so glad to be a part as an Ash Fellow this year with Dr. Gonzalez. And David, great to meet you too. I've been reading up on you, and I'm just can't wait to be a collaborator and a network of, to get some things going.
Thank you, Chip. I'm really hearing a lot of commonality in the sense of consciousness raising and just building these power networks, which is so necessary because we really need to create these networks to be able to support each other and to, in a sense, build these power and political engagement that is really missing. And so I appreciate both what you, Chip, and what you, Toyal, are doing. Now we're going to pass it over to Kai to share about herself and her organization.
Thanks, David. And thank you to everybody on the call and for those who are hosting tonight. Much appreciated. My play cousin, Chip, just kind of gave you a breakout, and also Toyal of really important work. Hence the reason why my husband and I founded Black Market in 2017. We knew that we needed to hold space specifically in the heart of the Black community, which is Roxbury, and has been historically the Black community after the South End and after Beacon Hill. That doesn't negate anything or anybody that abuts Roxbury. We embrace Dorchester, Mattapan, Hyde Park, and all of those other communities that have become more and more melanated. However, we felt that it was very important for our narrative and our stories to be told inside of a space that would kind of take the baton from the A-Nubian notions, the Ujima Marts, the international roots, the Black rep theaters that we grew up with. And we were fortunate enough to go on a Mecca, a journey to Nubia and into Egypt in 2016, and came back impregnated with this concept and idea to do something. We didn't know exactly what that was, but we signed leases almost a month after we got back and said, okay, what are we doing now? 90 days later, we end up on the continent again in Senegal. And I'm just going back to my retail days and just thinking about my skill set and some of the things that we've done over a period of 30 years of marriage. And I thought to myself, you know, seeing all of these marketplaces were so energizing. So why don't we, you know, start a marketplace and call it Black Market? Literally came home 90 days after that, established Black Market as a nascent pop-up marketplace. It has since transformed into a launch pad for over 500 or so different founders, different artisans, artists, activists, and an event space. And so we hold space for the African diaspora. We've done a lot inside of that space. It is definitely seasoned with the ancestors and their energy and their spirit. And I mean, we literally connect our community with resources. So the resources to become self-sustaining. That's what we've been about. Our mission has been to reignite the creative economy and close the $247,500 wealth gap between Black Boston and white Boston.
Thank you, Kai. And that's such a beautiful story. It reminds me of when me and my fiance actually went to Egypt. And similar to you, it was an eye-opening experience. And I think too, what just stuck out in my mind was that when I was growing up, you know, in the 90s, it was something where Egypt was kind of like the center. Everything was like, we need to go back to Egypt. We need to see the pyramids, you know, such symbolic meaning. And just to think about sort of like the fact that I got to go to Egypt and, you know, just like feel, I guess, in the sense of like this power and this energy, you know, I resonate with your sentiment about it changing your life and just that hunger to go back to Africa or to engage more with Africa. So thank you for, you know, sharing in your work and just creating the space for others to also engage. And so I'm going to pass it over to my co-moderator for the second question.
Great. Well, thank you so much, David. And thanks to each of our panelists for those opening remarks. It really is fantastic to hear about just how the creativity and inventing what didn't exist before. And, you know, particularly, I think what across all three of you are thinking about representation and visibility and building power, both political and economic, as really central to this. And I think that relates a lot to you know, what initially brought us to this event series, which is the mayoral election, which is very much about representation. Excuse me. The little ones want to have their voices heard too. So, you know, thinking about the mayoral election as being the historic one for the city of Boston, with the first non-white male, you know, mayor-elect. And having, you know, representation of a new set of actors here in Boston. So as I was sort of saying to Kai before we got started today, you know, of course, this historic election ought to be celebrated, but we also ought to not disconnect it from what's happening on the ground. And so I'd love to hear from each of you a bit about how you view this election, you know, how you think about it in terms of the relationship between Boston's Black community and government and local government. And what you think ought to be, you know, reflected in the mayor's agenda going forward. So why don't we get started again with Toyal?
Great question. I think, so one, you know, historically and to this day, Boston is very racially segregated, right? So my Boston, you know, is Roxbury, is Dorchester, is Mattapan, but others might be like, well, their Boston is West Roxbury and Chestnut Hill. And based off of what we're envisioning Boston to be, it's very clear what the, you know, racial and socioeconomic demographic is. And so I really just think that when we're thinking about politicians just in general, for a very long time, politicians have been focusing on the wants, of certain communities and ignoring the needs of others. And then not only ignoring those needs from the people in the inner city, which are people of color, but also ignoring the demands, right? So people are talking about how in 2020, so many people have come out, so many organizations have been built, but there have been so many activists and community leaders asking for certain things to change for a very long time. But those things have been ignored, right? So we're out here asking for, different things. And one thing that I've learned is that you don't ask for nothing, you have to demand it. Because when you ask for stuff, you give people the option to say no. And so we've changed that dynamic now. We're demanding things, but still things are being ignored and we're being told what we should want, right? So we're saying defund the police and they're saying, no, let's add more money to the police and let's get some community police, right? We're saying we want more parks and community centers so our young people are out on the street. And they're saying, no, let's build some new luxury buildings. And so I think that when we're thinking about this last election, I finally seen, because I do believe there was a few candidates that could have been good for, different positions, not just for the mayoral-elect, but also for city councilors. I think that what's different about this election beyond just the historical context is people actually know their place. And when I say know their place, I mean, y'all know that your position is to be for the people. We're not working for you. You're working for us. You're here to represent us. And I can actually see from, specifically when we're talking about the mayoral-elect, she has been working with communities of color and other communities for a very long time and working collaboratively. So instead of just, I'm coming in, to run Boston, this is like not my Boston, but this is our Boston. And I think that that is something that definitely stood out. And then thinking about the election, I think there are some people who genuinely did step in because they wanted to, help the communities of color and actually recognize that it's not housing discrimination and education and whatever. It's like, and then Black people is not a political issue. All these different issues, they're interconnected, and Black people are a part of these issues. And so I finally see candidates that are actually acknowledging that and not trying to push it off or just trying to get a vote. And then, of course, we did have some politicians that just needed a Black vote. But that is, my piece on it.
Thank you for that, Toyal. I mean, I think that's a really important reflection, right? Even that what you started with the notion that there's multiple Bostons, and that part of the task, I think, for the next mayor is going to be really having a Boston that is truly for everybody. And I think that you've laid out a fantastic agenda for getting that started. Why don't we turn now to Kai and hear a bit from your perspective? Sort of how do you view this sort of historical relationship between local, the Boston city government and local and Black communities, and how do you see the concerns of the community being represented now with this newly elected mayor?
Yeah, I'm a little older, so my perspective is probably rooted more in real true segregation. And so I come from a perspective of remembering when you couldn't walk to Wainwright Park and you would have cars full of white boys with baseball bats. I come from a perspective where I remember white adults attacking youth on buses. And, I got glimpses of those things. And also, I was definitely someone who was affected by those things in a real personal way. These things actually happened to me. It's a little different nowadays, although you're gonna always find remnants of that because we're dealing with a system. So no matter who is in leadership, you're dealing with a 200-plus-year-old system that is rooted in white supremacy and it's rooted in colonialism. So our community, I think to Toyal's point, I do want to point out that power does not concede. It concedes nothing without demand. It never has, it never will. That is Frederick Douglass's voice. And I still believe that to be firm and true right now. I look at this from a colonialistic lens, and knowing that that's how Boston was founded and that's how Boston makes its money. It's a tourism-based city. It's a sports-based city. It's a political and university-based city, and a hospital city. And so, you know, you have to deal with the root cause before you can even get to racism the way it stands today. And our relationship, when I say our, I'm representing the Black community in my mind as a young elder, which is, it's a very diverse community. It doesn't have one way of thought. You know, we're not a monolith. However, there is a very, I think, strong sense of how we should be moving forward from my perspective, which means you hold people accountable. I've been in a position where I've held Mayor Walsh accountable. I've had conversations with Mayor Janey, who happens to be the first Black mayor and female mayor, although not elected. But let's not erase that. That was a very important, critical point in which Mayor-elect Wu has gotten a lot of gain from. I've had conversations with Mayor Menino, tough conversations, and that's where we should be. We shouldn't be in the position where, you know, we're staying, you know, very much in a position where we're looking for handouts. There are a lot of assets in our community and a lot of wonderful, I think, community human capital, a lot of great opinion, and some folks that are putting some action to their prayers. It's important for us to get out of this place where we're fighting for basic human rights. We should not be second-class citizens inside of our own city. We shouldn't have to fight for, you know, affordable housing in the way that we are. And we shouldn't have to be in a position where our schools, you know, are not bringing forward, you know, getting our kids prepared to move forward into different industries of growth. We shouldn't have to beg for jobs. Why are we still at a point where there's less than 1% contracts going to Black-owned businesses? Why are we still at the point where we have firsts? I'm not trying to celebrate firsts anymore. This is an opinion question, and I'm voicing my opinion. I appreciate the thought behind advocacy and activism. And I think what we really need are a couple of different agendas. And so with that, I'm going to pass it on to Chip, I believe, or back to the moderators so that y'all can do your thing.
Thank you so much for that, Kai. And this is what's so fantastic about these kinds of conversations, is that the intergenerational perspective that I think, you know, the remarks from Toyal and Kai have really underscored, right? That even though the more things change, the more they stay the same, right? That's sort of a lot of the intractable problems remain. And both Toyal and Kai reminding us about the importance of continuing to make demands. Because so often in politics, what does occur is that communities are not really given what they're demanding, right? Sort of, you know, a kind of a bait and switch when it comes to engaging with political leaders is too common, as Toyal reminded us. And so, yeah, to that end, Chip, what's you know, I'd love to hear your reflections on this question too.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Love to just say hello. You know, I've known Kai for many years as in college together and programs together at the Freedom House. And we've just been really collaborators on a lot of things. And the best thing now is I'm settling into my OG status. And I'm very proud to be that, is that I've also had some wonderful mentors in the Boston area. And I think that's one thing we got to realize, is that Boston has these colleges and universities that we can start looking to as assets compared to liabilities. And we need to use them to help us get our community works moving forward. I got to give a shout out to Lanny Guinier and Charles Ogletree, who mentored me when I was 22 years old, when I was walking around in Central Square and Harvard Square. Got to give out a shout to many people like Mel King, also big time Mimi Jones, who just passed, and also G. McGuire, who when I was a young person, anytime I wanted to put on an event and have them speak, they dropped everything and made sure they came to those things. So I know Kai is in that spirit. I know I'm in that spirit. And I'm glad to carry on like my big uncle Ken Guscott, who was also involved in very much real estate in the city and so forth. But let me just go forward into this, is that we just had an amazing election right now. We had 3 mayors in like 9 months. That was amazing. You know what I mean? And the community, we got to give our hats off to all the candidates that ran for mayor and also city council. They did a lot of community building work out there. And before, I'm going to go back into history. I remember I did one of my first forums in 2009 with Mayor Menino, and it's interesting. The city said, "Why are you doing a forum? Are you not happy? What's going on here? We don't know. We don't do forums here in this town. You know, Mayor Menino's the mayor, and that's what it is." But I'm saying, no, that's not it. We need to have a check-in every 4 years if this is working and what's not. We just don't just carte blanche, just let them in the office. And I remember Michael Flaherty brought that up at an event that I just had about reminding people about the civic process, how messy it is, how involved it is. And really, I got to give out to these candidates out here. They've done lots of community meetings, and that's what this whole process is about. And getting in front of the community to show your ideas and your thoughts and all those great things. And right now we have Mayor-elect Wu. We're very proud of her. And she's been all over the place. And everyone knows that she's been zigzagging around the city. And I'm really proud that she's gonna be able to push the baton. But the thing that she has to start realizing, we all have to realize, is regulations. We need to start deregulating things. And that's a scary topic when we talk about regulation here in this town, because, you know, many things such as the liquor licenses, many things such as who gets to open up a restaurant, many things, who gets a taxi medallion, another thing, who gets to cook in their house, another thing. These are the issues about regulation. And I think these high regulations that are written in our government structures are very much tied to why we have $8 in our bank accounts. I think that's very true. And I think we need to start deregulating those systems. Some things I think the mayor needs to work on is we have the beautiful Blue Hill Avenue from 0 Blue Hill Ave right in Roxbury all the way up to Mattapan. We need to start doing initiatives that bring Blue Hill Avenue back to its heydays in the 60s, putting those restaurants into businesses, putting those resources into entrepreneurs, also creating creative spaces. The reason why lots of young people want to leave this city is because they're not able to create. We put all these boundaries on them and we have to make them fill out these forms. What you do with smart people is you put them in a room and you give them the ability to create. We don't need to set the agenda for them. They're supposed to set the agendas for us. And that's what the creative communities are here for and so forth. So I think as we go forward and looking at these next days of the transition between Janie to Wu, is that there needs to be a larger conversation going on about what does it mean to move that needle of that $8 into moving that into the thousands of dollars. And that's what we're gonna have our cornerstone on. And you know, Katie comes from a great family. You know, her sister was the mayor, you know what I mean? And her dad was Cliff Janey, you know what I mean? He was a big activist in the 70s and 80s and 90s here in the Boston area. So we have lots of great things to stand on in this town, but we're gonna have to start talking to each other and also using the resources of our universities. I think that every kid in every neighborhood should adopt a college in town. There are tons of programs. There are tons of resources at these schools and universities. They have upper bounds. They have science and technology programs. And there's no reason why that every young person in this town should have access to resources of our great universities and so forth.
Well, thank you for that, Chip. And we're going to come back to this question about university sort of sitting as we are, at least virtually, in the context of course, a university in the area. But wanted to just flag one thing that you just said that's really important, which is tying concrete government policies to people's realities, right? How government policies shape that wealth gap that so many of you have referenced so far, right? And so just to kind of go a little bit deeper on that point, I'm going to turn it over to my co-moderator, David, to ask the next question.
Thank you. And thank you, Chip, for lifting up those names, especially Jean McGuire and Mel King. I mean, kudos, of course, to everybody that you mentioned, but I know those people have had a special impact on me. It's funny because I lived in Tent City for, I think, a couple of years when I was in my adolescence. And I later found out that if it wasn't due to Mel King, that housing wouldn't even exist, and just that great activism that he's did. And it was so interesting because my mom, I told her, like, about, just my research on Mel King, and she was like, oh, do you remember there was a guy who used to help kind of like dig out snow for us when you were younger? And I was like, oh yeah, I kind of remember. And it was like, she's like, that's Mel King. And I was like, wow. So it's just, yeah, he's just such an instrumental person within the community. And yeah, just thank you for raising up his name as well as the other people. And so really just moving on to our next question, it's going to be around those instrumental 100 days that we usually talk about when we have a new politician, especially mayoral, governor, president. And so what are some of the challenges faced by our community that you work with, and just in the sense of the matters that are affecting them that you believe should be addressed in the first 100 days of Mayor-elect Michelle Wu's team? And how can the next mayor work to center the voices of Boston's Black communities and communities of color in general? And so we're going to just start it off with Chip.
I'll just keep on going. But I think it's Mayor Wu has a lot on her shoulders. And first of all, I hope she took 2 days off. I bet she didn't, but you know what I mean? Just understand what's about to go on in the next week is that she's been running for office for over 400 days. So we need to just, she was the first one that announced, or maybe Mayor Walsh announced, but she announced or someone announced it's open. But we just got to give the hats off to those people that put all that time and energy and all those people on our campaign that have done this work and given out time. So we got to give that out there. But she has her quick time. I mean, she knows City Hall. It's not like she's someone outside of City Hall. It's going to be able to have to put in these policies, but she has to be a change agent. And you know what? And there's some things that you do in corporate to change. You might paint some walls and add some pictures and all that, but you're going to have to do that immediately first to let people know that this is not the Walsh administration leftover. And she's put a lot of big promises out there. And so it's going to be really interesting how she's going to fulfill those promises. I mean, the thing about being free the tea, that has woken a lot of people up and the naysayers up about what they believe what government is. And so for Michelle to even say that kind of broke people's minds to say, well, we always pay for the tea. Well, why can't we just make it a public service and have everyone? So these are the new things that she's bringing out to us to talk about rent control. And it's rent control in her head is not the rent control that we had 20 years ago. So we need to have these open conversations of what governments and what innovation is that we can do inside of our city hall, because we've been around. Remember, we've had 20 plus years of Menino. That has stopped the plug on how we think of things. And so with Walsh and all these new city councilors jumping, this hopscotch game has now begun. We didn't have that for 20 years. We had the same old kind of relationships and all these things. So the thing is that what Michelle has to do, she has to hit the ground running and let her know there's a new sheriff in town and she's about to take everything by the horns and the bull and let folks know that I want to do something different here. And this should be an amazing laboratory for us to do that because we have a lot of resources here. I've worked in Atlanta. I looked at the nonprofit sector in Atlanta. There's no nonprofit sector in Atlanta. They're churches and the United Way. That's it, Salvation Army. Here we have a large group of community-based organizations, nonprofit groups that are very involved in the civic life of this city. That is an amazing asset. So Michelle, what she's been able to do is use all those mom and pop situations, sitting down with small owners of restaurants and community-based organizations. That was the key to her campaign. And I think she's going to continue doing that going forward. And so she just needs to realize that City Hall is doors open for everybody. And she needs to make that well known. Thanks.
No, very true. And she ran on a campaign in the sense of this is our city and a city that's inclusive for everybody. And so really just focusing on how do you showcase that to people that they feel like this is our city and that we all have a place within it and that we all should feel welcome and that we should all feel that we have the power to engage in the way that is necessary. So it is a huge task, but I think based off of her campaign, you know, it's something that she needs to get in front of. And I think, you know, she will be able to do that.
And she has to set the tone. There's a new change coming and people need to see it. She needs to see it in their hires. She needs to see it's this new thinking and some new strategies that she's gonna play out that she wants to have a really, and I'm judging her and the administration, the needle of moving that $8 figure. That's the way I'm judging her.
A racial wealth gap. It's immense. I recommend to everybody in the audience to see the color or to read the Color Wealth Report for the Federal Reserve. So it's very powerful and eye-opening. Thank you, Chip. Kai, do you mind sharing some thoughts?
Oh, yes. Thank you so much. I'm excited because I am definitely going to be holding audience with our new mayor as soon as I possibly can. There's a lot because this is what we've been doing. So the momentum is already kind of, you know, we're already in motion, but you know, for us, it's really about procurement. It's about getting the dollars that our community needs. You know, because the challenges that we've had, it's all stemming around equity. It's you know, it's a critical point that really will inform whether you can be healthy, whether you can have access to the right mental health care, whether you can have access to treatment, whether you can have access to housing, whether you can have access to the ability to work and sustain yourself, start a business. So we need some startup capital. Like where are these dollars that are coming from the federal government level? How do they trickle then to the state and city? Let's really have cross conversations around that so that we can get some startup money and home buying opportunities. We need millennials to be able to buy something within that $200,000 range. We can't, you know, everybody's not able to get into a position where they can purchase a house, but we might be able to have some type of workforce housing that can be created. Public art dollars, extremely important. We have to pay Black artists. We can no longer use them for the greater good and pay them a stipend as though they're wearing a red shirt, which was a totally racist program back in the day. Chip knows about the red shirts. Licensing and permitting, we've got to do something about ISD. And, you know, we were supposed to have a big change when it came down to the BRA, which is the Boston Planning and Development Agency underneath Walsh. We just got a name change. We didn't really have any sort of real seismic shifts that would move the needle in regards to development. And so development without displacement, how do we really, you know, deal with that? Because that's a really sticky issue. Anti-gentrification, and we've got to deal with commercial displacement because, you know, that's something that is a factor that we see all the time, at least in Nubian Square, so many vacancies, dealing with landlord issues. The list could go on, but it's really about getting these conversations to be recognized as priorities so that they don't fall by the wayside and we end up with another Melnia Cass Boulevard foolery, which has just been festering for the last 12 years. So that's what I would say.
Thank you, Kai. Really powerful sentiments. And I think, it really centers around business equity and economic justice, and connects to what Chip was saying, because it's about making sure that procurement is more equitable and that these small businesses within the Black community are getting the resources that they need to expand and grow and, you know, just be great. But then I think it goes into with like, how do you invest in the microeconomies within the Black community that is separate from these, it's a part of the larger economy, but these microeconomies where the money that flows in stays within the community and just circulates as opposed to leaving, which I think I saw a report where if dollars within the Black community stay in maybe hours and then, you know, go into other racial communities, whereas within the white community, I think it's days or weeks. And so that disparity that we see also is a part of this racial wealth gap, which is, you know, really centered around how do we make sure that our dollars stay in our community and then benefit the people that really need it.
David, we had $14 million worth of leakage in Nubian Square back in 2012. That's back in 2012. $14 million worth of leakage. We take our money. I got to go to a Seaport event right after this. You know, I'm not anti-Seaport, but at the same token, we know who can afford to live there and who can afford to really have, you know, sustainable business spaces. You know, it's great to do pop-ups because that's the whole purpose of helping to scale a business. But if we can't actually be a part of a community for real, why am I spending my money there and my time?
Thank you, Kai. Toyal?
So when I want to start with saying that, like, I acknowledge, you know, that in 100 days, you know, mayoral is not going to be able to transform and change what has been done in the last 400 years. And so we have to be realistic with that. But I also can acknowledge that 100 days is more than enough time to start announcing what these plans are. And so not only do I want to hear plans, but I want to hear action items. Like, I want actionable steps from, you know, ranging from 3 months from now, a year from now, 3 years from now. Like, I want actual game plans, because no, she may not be able to change everything right away. But we need transparency and, like, what are the actual plans? I don't want to just hear, you know, what was thrown out during a debate. I want to hear that the vivid plan, whatever you're talking about with your team, I want to hear it too. And so one, I want to talk about, I like that Kai addressed Melina Cass. We need to move with a sense of urgency with that, because, you know, the acting mayor in her final days decided, let's throw some people in jail. Jail is not housing. And so we need to figure out, one, how we can start decriminalizing homelessness, because that is what has been going on, throwing people in jail, but then also figuring out, like, how do we prevent this? Because there's so many people talking about intervention and what do we do after the fact, but what about prevention? What about stopping this from happening? And that goes right into affordable housing. There's all these luxury buildings being built and they're empty. They're empty. There's nobody in them because nobody can afford them. Because, you know, salaries are not high enough for the living wage. And so we don't have no affordable housing, and people don't have enough money for, you know, the standard rent that's going on in Boston. And so people are homeless, and now we're throwing them in jail because of it. And so affordable housing and just addressing Melina Cass is the first thing I would definitely say in this just 100 days. And then also BPS is a mess right now. BPS has been a mess for 2 years, well, forever really. But BPS, you know, in this last year and these last few months, and I understand there's a pandemic, but that should really have them moving with a sense of urgency and making sure that our young people are taken care of. And so BPS has a few, you know, middle schools that are shutting down that have been around for decades, and they have a whole bunch of fifth graders that have no placements. That should be something in the 100 days that they're figuring out, like, what are we doing? And then also let's acknowledge there's no pool testing going on in BPS. You're putting teachers in danger because some kids are not, you know, eligible to be vaccinated. So we need to figure out, what are we doing with that? We need to acknowledge that so many kids have reported that during the pandemic, they finally felt like they weren't policed. And now that they're back in school, they're feeling like, okay, well, we acknowledge that all the issues you said were behavioral issues aren't really that, because when we were doing virtual learning, clearly it wasn't that bad. And so acknowledging that and just really making sure that BPS is being addressed through like transformative and restorative justice lens, and actually just transforming now that they are back, and then putting resources into the Madison, has a vocational school, and Madison is also under-resourced. And so we have to really just acknowledge, one, like I said, education is a foundation of everything, and our young people are important and they're always left out and forgotten. And if we want to actually, push them to do better, push them to go to college, push them to go to trade school, push them to be their own entrepreneurs, we have to actually fund our schools so that they can get there. When I grew up, I was told I could be a teacher or a lawyer or a doctor. I didn't know I could start my own nonprofit. I didn't know I could be an entrepreneur. I didn't know these things. So we actually have to put resources in these schools and then fill the gaps, of the things that we're missing, when it comes to education. And then when we're thinking about where these resources are coming from, to my last point, people talk about defunding the police being so radical, and they defund everything but the police when they don't need all that money. Police as a whole, it's $1 billion industry. Our police budget out here, millions of dollars, and they don't need all that money. And not only do they not need all that money, but they're also not trained in everything that, they are pushed to address. Why, when a suicide attempt, was going on, why are the police there? What are you going to do? Are you trained, for mental health? So why are police in schools? What's the reasoning behind that? So thinking about how much money, the police get, we need to reimagine what community can look like if we reallocated those funds and put those towards Black businesses in our actual communities, like putting them actually in Roxbury, in Dorchester, and Mattapan, not trying to push them out and give us a Black business every now and then in Seaport or Chestnut Hill or somewhere that's not accessible to the people that it's supposed to be for. Reallocating those funds to community centers and parks. I haven't seen, any parks in a while. All I see is luxury buildings. And so reallocating those funds to areas that, kids can go to, reallocating them to places for teenagers to work at so that kids are not on the street. They keep talking about people riding bikes and people being in gangs and all these other things that are very preventable if we actually gave spaces to young people to be at. But that all goes into reallocating funds. And if we want to start with that, we have to think about where we're going to get those funds from, which is the police. And so to my final point, defunding the police and actually putting those in places like education, like Black businesses, like mental health and domestic violence, and all those people who are actually doing the work or working towards getting that work done, so that, crime is going down, and community is going up.
Thank you, Toyal.
And I just want to say something real quick. Toyal, I just want to be clear, is defund the police is nothing new. This zero-based budgeting came around during the Carter administration's 40 years ago. And I know Reagan talked about using zero-based budgeting, but it's a process of how you look at the budget and you justify your budget every year. So it's a tool, it's a technique. So there are many different tools and techniques that we can use. So defund the police is nothing new. So I don't want anyone running around and say that this is up. This is a real process that people can actually use to start thinking about what are the priorities right now. So I just wanted to piggyback on your comment.
Thank you, Toyal, and thank you, Chip, for that insight. I think with everything that you said, Toyal, it just makes me think about how interconnected all of these issues are. Even though we give them different names, and usually the people who work on them may or may not work in silos, it's all rooted in from the same source. And, when we're talking about economics and what's invested in and what's not invested in, I think it really does align with this notion of systemic racism, where it goes into what does society care about to invest, and sort of what they don't invest in, how little they care about it, or in the sense of just how it doesn't necessarily, in the grand scheme of things, matter to those in power, even though it may matter for those who need those services or need those resources to, like you said, think about the world differently and think that hey, I can have my own organization. And so thank you for sharing that. I'm going to pass it over to my co-moderator to lead us into some audience questions that we received before this meeting.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Toyal, Kai, and Chip for this conversation. I think you guys have really been demystifying a lot of, what otherwise buzzwords, procurement, regulation, budget, right, or things that maybe are a little bit hard to grasp. But you are really putting concrete, language on what each of those otherwise policy jargon really mean for communities. And for equity. And so thank you for that. I'm gonna group actually a couple of audience questions together because I think they're all kind of pointing in the right in the same direction. So one of the questions that we had received in when people were registering was, how can staff at an unnamed Ivy League school cause more good trouble? And I think that this really aligns with a lot of the other questions, including one that we just received in the Q&A today. Another person wanted to know, how do we attract new leadership to transform and invigorate our communities? And another question in the Q&A just now put it very plainly. What are action plans? So it's all kind of thinking in that direction, and pointing back to Chip's point about sort of leveraging these universities. What are the institutions that are on hand to sort of do everything that you guys have been talking about? And so sort of in this kind of final round of questions, before we wrap up, I'd love to hear from each of you sort of about those action plans, sort of concretely, so each of us from our own positions, whether that's within universities or other institutions locally. What do we do? How do we all sort of start organizing and building new leadership, building new spaces for transformation? Oh, sorry, I didn't. Why don't we start with Kai for this one?
Sure. My thought is there needs to be a political incubator. One of the biggest issues that we have, it's two-sided. You have baby boomers who like to stay in office for like 30, 40 years without any bench strength. And then you have a group of younger generation folks that need a little more seasoning. They need a little more understanding of process. They need perhaps some training, some political action training, some activism training, and some models that can be put before them. Just like Chip was saying about this whole Carter administration and how defunding the police isn't anything new. It's kind of like a resurgence, but you don't really hear where things come from and where thoughts kind of stem from. So I think universities really need to be, positioning themselves in ways that are very diverse, because typically their endowments and their budgets are really big. So if we want some type of movement when it comes down to preparing, folks for the race in 4 more years to go against Michelle, or, to take the place of Charlie Baker, we need to be preparing and having just a clearinghouse of different, options so that we can really get to a place in that fashion when it comes to politics. But incubators, I think in general, are crucial in order for leadership to be developed. I went through the Project Reach Scholars Program out of the Freedom House with Chip, with Lori Nelson, with Tito Jackson, and several other community leaders, Carolyn Crockett. So we have a network of 50 times 4, about 200 of us. And we're able to really utilize, the available resources that we have amongst each other. But it would be wonderful to see things like that replicated, so that leadership can really be ready, because we were not ready for this election. We just were not ready to take advantage and put into place a Black mayor. And or to keep in place a Black mayor, because we had one, let alone getting another one elected or what have you. We just weren't able to produce that. And it would be wonderful to be able to see that in my lifetime, to see folks like Toyal get into a place where they can really affect change and really start to move the needle and shift the narrative.
Thank you, Kai. I love this idea of a political incubator, and once again, thinking, you know, across generations and how we sort of leverage knowledge from, you know, from generation you know, from other generations into sort of younger folks today. Why don't we hear from Chip some of your thoughts about sort of, you know, how do we move forward? What's the action plan look like, and how do institutions like universities and those of us at universities, you know, how can we join the work that you all are doing?
No, it's quite an honor. I think I remember 30 years ago, I think Reverend Eugene Rivers told me to come to a forum in 1992 called The Black Intellectual in the Age of Crack. And it was at the Kennedy School and also at MIT. And that forum actually changed my life. Henry Louis Gates was there, Cornel West was there, also Bell Hooks, Glenn Lowry. And that forum talked about the role that the Black intellectual, it was an argument forum because everyone was all over the place about crack and how it was destroying our communities in the early 80s and 90s, and what role does the Black intellectual play. That actually helped me form the way that I wanted to present myself in the work that I do. And it's always been a guiding force about what ways do universities help our communities. I grew up in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Harvard and MIT were my mentors. They were my volunteers when I was a kid in grammar school. And so I think all these universities here, we're university rich, need to adopt a school and adopt a neighborhood because their presence is amazing in these young people's lives. I remember learning logo at MIT and getting a Mac computer in our classroom in 1980 when it first kicked off. Those are the things I'd explored. But another thing we got to realize is that in Kendall Square has been voted by Bain, I think it was Bain, as the most creative square mile in the universe. That's amazing. So we need to make sure that our young people are a part of that creativity and get resources and access to all those different jobs that are going on there. Back in the day, I worked at Polaroid because of a high school internship in Cambridge. I was making $3.35 at McDonald's. Hey, minimum wage was $3.35, y'all, back in the day. But I got $15 an hour in 1985, 86 as an engineering intern working in a corporation. And you know what? That put me on the trajectory to do great things and move forward and do. So we need to put that kind of energy back. We got the resources here. We're not an unresourced not town. We have the resources. So that's one thing I want people to realize, that the universities have an integral part to play. And the next thing is about Black boys and having Black boys experience joy. I'm so glad the commission that was just brought out by the City Council of Boston to explore Black boys and what their status in society is. I remember in the 90s, my father told me when I lived in Mission Hill with my dad in the 1990 not to come home because of Charles Stewart and how he murdered his wife and blamed it on a Black man. He told me not to come home. He said, stay in Atlanta. You're safe down there. Those echoes still live in the minds of our communities and our young people, and the way that they treated Black men in Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan by stop and frisk has functionally dysfunctioned a lot of Black men in this town. So these are the whispers that people don't want to talk about. These are the relationships that people don't want to talk about, and they want to skim all over that. But these are the things that we need to focus on. Michelle Wu has to take that by the bull by the horn and say, this is who we are. I want people to learn about this history. It's important, and how we actually talk about that transformation process to help make Black people better in this town.
Thank you, Chip. I think that's, you know, great to hear some of that history. Just to really see, what can we, that there's something meaningful that we can do from universities to really sort of build some of that leadership that Kai was talking about. And I think that it's very fitting, with a question like this to sort of have our last word be from Toyal. As a young leader, you really are the next you're the current generation, and you're going to be the next generation of leaders in this city as well. And so would love to hear your thoughts, Toyal, to close us out. What do you see as the action plans that are needed, and how can folks from universities and other local institutions really help build on that, the work that you and other young folks are doing?
So I think one, everyone continues to stop after an election happens and they get who they want in, the position of power. After Biden was elected, I've seen things die down. And I feel like we need to stop thinking we have this person to represent us, and now let's stop doing the work. We need people to continue being loud and doing what they were doing, during the election. So that, pressure is continued to be applied and things continue to happen, because that's the only way they're going to happen. Another thing that I feel like needs to happen is the Black community needs to actually come together and figure out what it is that we want. There's so many different ideas being thrown out of what we want to do and how we want to do it and when and where. But I think that we need to actually come together and decide, like, these are our priorities right now. This is what we want to do, and this is how we're going to do it, so that we can actually show up to these spaces, show up to these politicians, and actually make it be clear. Because when we're throwing out all this different stuff, that's when politicians are starting to tell us, well, y'all don't know what y'all want, so we're going to tell you what we want. And it's never close to that. And so that, I think, so that, and just in general, are some first steps. And then specifically when we're thinking about higher ed, well, one, we need to recognize that higher ed is one of the biggest institutions that uphold white supremacy, right? And that's how it's been forever. Like, education has been used as a tool, against Black people. There was a point where we couldn't read and write. And so just one, acknowledging that, then clearly all of the systems that you have within your institutions clearly are upholding white supremacy. So just thinking about little things like the fact that there's, a huge call to change, the application process for people to get into certain schools, and taking off, like, are you a felon? They're even asking that question. Some people are going the route of, let's take off, like, if you were in jail because of, marijuana in states that this is not illegal, like, let's take that off. Let's not ask that question anymore. And so you can't try to do work externally if you're not doing the work internally, if you're not actually addressing, as a faculty member, as a student, as a staff, what are the things in your institution itself that are contributing, to these problems. And you have to lead by example. The city, the state should not demand you have affirmative action or demand that you change this policy. Like, they shouldn't have to do that for you to feel like, what, let's change something. That's not how it should be. It should be, let's lead by example. Let's think and constantly think about the different things that we can change at our institution that upholds white supremacy, and let's change things to make things more equitable for the people of color on our campus, for the Black people on our campus. And so by leading by example, then you'll have other universities that are looking to do this work and now can use you as reference. I went to Salem State University, and I met with the president's executive cabinet every month to think about how to accommodate Black people on campus and how to reallocate funds to places they needed, like scholarships, like getting people there. And so a lot of that, feedback was always, but we can't because we're a public school. We can't because state laws and blah. So go look at other state schools and go look at what they do, right? So you have to lead by example for those people, who need it. And then go do the work externally. So actually sending, your students out. Of course, there are rules, regulations on your campus, but let them know that they could still step into their power, even if it isn't on their campus, and, challenge people, encourage your students to challenge people, because it's always this, you can't do this and you can't do that. But it's just like, if you don't know as a faculty member how to go about stopping, your students from doing radical change because they're not allowed, to mind your business. Mind your business and let them do what they need to do. to actually change things at your university, and then spread that out across. I seen somebody made a comment that like there's universities, they own so much property, they own so much stuff, they have so much money, and that money can be placed, into places in the community. Like Northeastern is in Roxbury. So it's just like, why are we not thinking about Roxbury in that community and, what is needed there? There are plenty of schools, elitist schools in Massachusetts. We have Northeastern, we have Tufts, we have, Harvard, we have BU, we have all these schools with plenty of money that can be given that money back into the community. So allowing your young people to actually say where they want this money to go, and allowing them to step into their power to do it. And that's how I'll close out.
Dave, can I just say one thing? We just got to give these young people places to be creative. And, creative is not being here sitting on your phone all the time. With no places to play, there's no places for young people to actually get along and work out problems and talk to each other. And I think there's a lot of that stuff with COVID and the principles and the ways that things have been taught, how learning is now going on. I mean, it's very interesting about even the way that how we approach elections now. I was a part of the days, and Kaidi knows this, of street team. We didn't have no internet when we had to put a party on at Northeastern or something. We had to go outside and pass out flyers. So I think that some of the things that Toyal was talking about, and Dave, yourself as well, is that we got to get back to the basics of talking to our neighbor, talking to our friend, and feeling comfortable and having those conversations face to face, and just said, let me just not throw it up on the internet. I threw it up on the Instagram. I'm done. No, it takes time. It's a lot of work, and you're gonna have to build it neighborhood, street by street, neighbor by neighbor, and so forth. Kai, please jump in on that.
I just wanted to, because it's good energy here. The universities need to start with the Black student unions. Why are we starting from this missionary standpoint as though everybody needs saving? They need to do a better job with their own Black students and developing them and bringing them to a place where they're comfortable on campus. I mean, some of those things, will turn into job opportunities, internships, placement opportunities. They also have to deal with their procurement budgets. Don't come, just like Toyal said, you're in Northeastern, you're in Roxbury. We've had a lot of issues politically around this for decades. I mean, decades. My father was one of the students that took over the president's office and had several demandments. And that's how we got the Black Institute over at Northeastern. I won't get into that. The land, they're playing Pac-Man. We have to have some type of retribution for the land that they take and create dorms with, because we're left destitute without any opportunity to purchase and live and own something in our own communities. Scholarships, not enough of them. We need to have more scholarships coming, and we need to have an unnaming of these racist icons that all of these school buildings and all these statues, we can do better, and we can really move into a place where we're not uplifting white supremacy inside of our universities and just perpetuating the trauma that Chip talked about, because that's really what we have to deal with on a daily basis, and other folks can just kind of, get their education and leave. We are then, the onus is on us to actually change a system and get an education and have a job and it's really difficult for us to navigate all of that. And it's not our responsibility to dismantle the system that, other folks' forefathers put into play.
My great aunt Ruth, she passed away 15 years ago, but she told me she used to go to all those Northeastern meetings and fight because there's an unwritten pact, she told me at the age of 92, that Northeastern was not supposed to go past Tremont Street. Unwritten pact. She talked about it. And the way that keeps on creeping, Kai's right, Pac-Man is happening all over right now. So there's these rules that were talked about that the BRA have said and written down, non-written down, that our great aunts and uncles and grandparents have told us. In the 90s, they told the students, don't go past Ruggles. Remember, Northeast, don't you dare. Coyote was there. So forth. These are the things, the whispers that are still out there. So forth. Go for it.
Thank you, everybody, for sharing. We reached the conclusion of our meeting today, and so I just want to give a couple of thank yous. Thank you to my co-moderator, Yanilda, who oversees and leads the What Justice Looks Like series. I want to thank the Ash Center for facilitating and hosting this event, and also our co-sponsors. I want to give a huge thank you to our panelists for such important conversations and thoughts. And, just as we can see tonight, there's so much to talk about, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And I think really just connecting that, thank you to the audience for being here today and sticking it out with us. And really just want to leave with, even though this is a historic moment within Boston, it's not the end in itself. It's a means to an end, and we can never stop moving forward because, as our panelists have said, we need to demand change. It can't be asked for, it has to be demanded. And so how do we build that capacity to get to that point? And I think this conversation is the beginning of, and I mean, not to say the beginning in the sense of like, nobody else has been talking about it, but I hope that this conversation is the beginning for a lot of people and the continuation of this conversation of how do we build political and civic power. So thank you again to everybody for being here. And please reach out to any of us if you want to get engaged or if you have any questions, because this is also a part of building community. We're building community tonight, and we need to continue to build community because we need all of us at the table to make these changes.